The award-winning A Black Executive Perspective podcast presents A Mixed Executive Perspective. Hosted by Grace Fooden Correy, a biracial executive with a distinct voice on leadership and belonging. A Mixed Executive Perspective.
Hi, I'm Grace Fooden Correy, and welcome to A Mixed Executive Perspective. This is a space to explore how mixed identity is read and often misunderstood in corporate culture and beyond. These conversations are for mixed people across race, ethnicity, nationality, and culture, and for parents raising mixed children navigating these dynamics. Today, I want to talk about how most of my life and career revolved around white culture. Through mentoring, I began a relationship with Black culture and learned how to tell the awkward stories of living in white culture. And I found that they connected me to the young people that I worked with. If you've ever felt like you had to edit yourself, explain yourself, or decide how much of yourself was safe to bring in the room, this conversation is for you. So let's break it down. First, let me tell you about my first relationship, real Black relationship, and that was with a Black therapist. And it was actually my second attempt to have a Black relationship because in high school, I switched from the private school to a public school that was mostly Black, and that didn't work out very well for me. But here I was. I had been to many therapists before. They were always white. And I always thought I had to go to a white therapist because I lived in white culture. But I wanted to talk to a Black therapist to really see if I could connect. And I did in some ways, and in some ways I didn't. I really never treated her with respect. I saw that little putting her below me that comes from my being raised in white culture from day one. But at the same time, she really understood me and she brought things out of me that I never had told anyone else before, including the fact that I wasn't held as a child between 1 and 2 or thereabouts because my family had been in a terrible car accident. And I was the only one who wasn't hurt, and I was sitting on my mother's lap, a baby with no seatbelt on. But my mother, for that year after that car accident, lived on a hospital bed that she couldn't get off of in our living room while the rest of my family was recovering. I was in a playpen and I wasn't really very connected. And she brought out, that's why I'm so independent. That's why I am who I am. And still, I didn't treat her with that much respect. So she made me confront my father and my sister about this. And this was really tough. It wasn't something talked about in our family, but they went deep with me and I learned a lot. But it's something that, again, still didn't treat her the same way I treated a white therapist. And that showed up in a lot of ways. Like sometimes I would just not show up for appointments. No call. I'm not that girl. I'm a corporate professional. And there were just days I just didn't show up. On call her the next Tuesday and say, oops, sorry. Eventually, I actually just left. And I didn't really even tell her then. I called her like a week or so later and said, I'm not coming back anymore. But that was my first Black relationship, real Black relationship in my life as I look back on it. And she gave me something that I would never have had without her, which is a connection to that early trauma. So it was then many, many, many years later that I started mentoring. I was working in a corporate atmosphere in a nice corner office. And someone from another level below me, a Black woman, came in my office and invited me to a mentoring program she had started in Harlem. I didn't really go to Harlem, but this woman was really nice. And I thought, why not? We went and had dinner. She was really smart. And that wouldn't call her a friend yet, but it was the beginning of me having another Black relationship. And I went with my long blonde hair on a Saturday to her program. And it was the beginning of the Black hair movement. And they all looked at me and thought I was so out of touch. No one really wanted to talk to me at all. So I started talking to the kids. And I met this really nice special needs girl. And we sat there and listened to the program together and kind of talked about it together. So I would say she might be my second relationship with a Black person. This special needs girl who was probably in 10 or 11 in middle school. And she and I talked about it, and we talked about my hair and why I wore it that way. And the course, which was really teaching Black people empowerment, these young kids empowerment, was teaching me empowerment as well. I was learning about scientifically what melanin was. I was looking about the different types of Black communities over America. And me and my new special needs friend were learning this together. And it was amazing. And then I moved back to California, so I wasn't part of that program anymore. And then there was COVID. And they started that program again, but it was going to be online. And I was super excited that I could join again. So I was talking to one of my white girlfriends, because let's face it, that's what I had, about how excited I was about this program starting up again as I went to the nail salon. And I sat down next to a woman who, after I got off that call, said, "Hey, I hear you do some mentoring." And she told me about a program she had just started at USC. And they were doing it during COVID. And I thought, wow, this is cool. This woman has started this on her own. Because there was nothing like it at USC for Black women. So I went to one of their sessions, and she said, just tell them about your life, tell them about your story. And I did, and I told it from my biracial perspective. And what was fascinating is I was telling them about walking past the Black school, public school, to my private school, and how some of these guys would always say, "Oh, she thinks she's white," because they saw me walking past that school. And they all connected with that. All of those girls had had a similar experience, although none of them were mixed, because they were smart, because they were on the bus and they were going to the honors classes, right? These are the girls that ended up at USC. And we ended up tearing up. And by the end of the session, we were bawling together. But that connection was made. That's really where I found that my story, telling it my way, not cutting out the white part or cutting out the Black part, really connected with people. So mentoring allowed me that connection with the Black community and helped me find my purpose. Later, I was asked to be on the board of Cal Poly Pomona, which has an apparel merchandising and management program. And as a fashion person, somebody I knew from the industry, a nice white lady who'd been a senior exec, thought I would be a good candidate for it and take over her spot. I took it, honestly, because I thought it would look good for me to have a board on my LinkedIn. I wasn't really thinking about the kids when I took that position. But over time, I thought, what is my purpose here? Why am I here? Yeah, I'm sitting in this room with all these people. And after a few times, I didn't just feel important. I felt like I wanted to have a purpose. And then I brought up that I could do some mentoring, that I was doing mentoring other places. And they said they had done some mentoring programs in the past, and they were starting a course that was going to include some mentoring for seniors who were about to graduate. And so I've been participating with that now for a couple of years. And that's also been transformative. Now, Cal Poly is a school in a diverse neighborhood. It's a diverse community. There are a lot of Asians, Hispanics, some Black, some white. But I tell all the students I mentor my story as a mixed woman, and they all connect to it. So this thing that I thought no one could understand, I found through mentoring was my connection. So that's really how I learned to be authentic and to take that authenticity with me in whatever room I'm in. And that's really what I learned. That's really what I learned when I learned how to tell my own story, I could connect to other Black people, and I could really have a relationship that was based on who I am. And that was enough. So I want to thank you for listening today. And before I wrap up, don't forget to check out A Black Executive Perspective, hosted by Tony Tidbit and Chris P. Reed. Each week, they tackle leadership, culture, and the conversations many people avoid. You can find it right here on A Black Executive Perspective channel. And thank you for joining A Mixed Executive Perspective, a space where we examine mixed identity and how it's read at work and in culture, and in the stories we're told about ourselves. If this conversation resonated with you, please share your thoughts and comments wherever you're listening to this podcast. And in addition, please like, subscribe, and share this episode with someone who needs this conversation. It helps us reach more people. Until next time, remember, you belong.
A Black Executive Perspective.